back in the house, okay?
This is my land.
I understand your land, but we're right here conducting a police investigation, okay? And we don't need to get
That's fine. I know you don't have to start fucking hollering at me.
I'm not hollering at you. I'm asking you to please step back and go back in the house. Your eyes are here.
If you take this all out of the road, it's my yard.
Okay.
That's what I say.
So, okay.
Well, you got what you said, but he wanted to run from us and pull in here, so that's on him, but not on us.
That's on him. Why are you pressing him to the ground?
Because we asked him to step back, all right? We're asking you to step back. Please step back.
Man, I'm in my... I'll tell you what. Come on, somebody. Get this right.
Okay. So, again, if we look at what constitute excessive force also, as far as the continued use of force after somebody's been rendered incapable of further resistance or escape, it's obvious to see here that it was a textbook use of one strike, taking the person to the ground, cuffing him, and then the force de-escalated at that point. So to us, it's a pretty cut and dry use of force. It may be even a really simple use of force that didn't require this much explanation, but I think any force situation that you may run across, you can use this same type. I mean, this is how we judge them. This is how we determine whether or not what they did was reasonable. So.
All right, before we go on and take some questions, before we take any questions, there's a couple of other things that I want to mention. Number one, the videotape has been of high priority. Everybody's wanted to see the video. Are you going to release the video? We told you from an early date that we would do that. We actually secured the videotape from the Troopers patrol car the next morning and secured it. When that was done, we conducted a investigation into the use of force, and we actually convened a 5-man peer review board. Now, the purpose of the review board, which was manned of basically peers and superiors, there was a major that chaired the board. They took all the evidence that was there, basically the video. They took statements from the individuals that were involved, and we're basically talking about the troopers. There was actually a Wetumpka Reserve police officer that was riding with Trooper Allen. We actually took his testimony. We took the testimony of our subject matter experts in the use of force, like Lieutenant Tipton, and 2 other individuals, an attorney out of Tulsa, former TPD officer, his name's Scott Wood, I believe. He's also the general counsel for I believe it's the National Tactical Officers Association, so this guy's well-versed in the use of force. And then after they took all this testimony, reviewed the videotapes, they measured all that information against not only department policy, but state and federal law to come to their conclusions on the use of force. I think it's probably important also that we do say we did not interview during that board Christopher Douglas, who was the individual that we saw taken into custody here. We did not interview the homeowner, Jerry Ford, that you saw at the end of the videotape. And we did not interview Lucas Carson, who was the driver of the Pontiac Firebird that we stopped to begin with. And we felt like we didn't need those interviews because the videotape is pretty clear itself. I mean, you can see what transpired. Following those things, the information was provided to the chief's office. The chief reviewed everything, felt like the actions that the troopers took on that day were justified, made his recommendations to the commissioner, Commissioner Ward, and effective today, both the troopers have been taken off administrative leave and placed back to full duty. So, like I said in the very beginning, we'd be happy to take some questions as long as they're limited to this incident from October the 3rd and the presentation that Lieutenant Tipton made here today. And maybe, you know, if you want to ask some questions about things between October 3rd and this presentation, we'll take some of those things. So, does anybody have any questions? Okay.
I'm Ann Kelly with the Oklahoma. Lieutenant Tipton, was this an instance where excessive force was used for control or for defense?
Do you want to repeat the question?
I don't. Okay, the question was: is this an instance where excessive force was used for control?
I'm sorry, where the use of force was used for control or defense?
Okay, I would say that it was a little bit of both. From the view of Trooper Martin, he felt as though Trooper Allen was in a defensive position. If this individual would have fallen on top of Trooper Allen, it would have been a defensive type of arrest. it was still a very low-level amount of force as far as injuries are concerned. You know, the propensity for that pain and injury was very small. I don't know that there was any injury at all to the individual who had the strike. So we're kind of crossing into, this was a defensive type movement that once this, if this person would have stayed standing up and complied with the officer cuffing him, and he would have been able to handcuff him, the trooper could have handcuffed him from a standing position, it would have been a total control type of an arrest. But once he starts making movements and putting pressure, moving backwards against the trooper, then we're talking about it's a defensive type position where, you know, again, if he falls on him, it ends up on the ground, it turns into a fight on the ground.
And because this is a small community, a small area where these troopers work, did these troopers ever have any other dealings with this particular suspect?
The question is, it's a small community. Have these particular troopers
Yes.
had previous experience with Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge.
I will say this, apparently in this part of town, it is a high area where not only the patrol, but also the department, the Holdenville PD and the sheriff's office, they make a lot of drug arrests in that area. So it is a fairly, you know, high crime area, I guess you would say.
Well, now that these guys, the troopers have been restored to full duty, what are the charges, criminal charges that Lucas Carson and Chris
Okay.
Douglas?
The question is, now that these guys have been cleared, what charges does Christopher Douglas
And Lucas Carson face?
and Lucas Carson face? Well, I don't think that one has anything to do with the other now that they've been cleared. From what I understand, the district attorney in Hughes County had already filed charges for obstruction against Mr. Douglas. So one doesn't have anything to do with the other.
As far as the video, are you guys going to continue to release video in a timely fashion of any similar allegations of excessive force?
The question is, since we're releasing this video, are we going to continue to release video on a timely basis? What I would say is we're going to look at it on a case-by-case situation and make our determination based on the facts that we look at.
They have been on paid leave since this incident happened?
Yes, that's correct. The question was, have they been on paid administrative leave since the incident happened on October the 3rd? And that is correct, and they're being released back to duty effective today.
And
Captain West,
Right here. Let's go ahead and.
I'm Captain West. I think now that people will see that Trooper Martin, specifically Trooper Martin, is back out on the force, they're still upset at what's happened at the paramedic incident. How can you ensure to these people that have this outcry that OHP has a guy running around with a badge and a gun that is just beating up people?
We're not going to take those kind of questions. I said at the very beginning and then reiterated before we opened it up that we will take questions limited to this incident from October the 3rd, what's transpired from then till now in this presentation, and that's outside the scope.
Okay, well then within this scope, how can OHP react and ensure the public that Trooper Martin in this incident, since he is back on the force, there's been so many people wanting to call him off of the force. How can you ensure public safety is not at risk or counter their accusations?
And again, I really think that's outside of the scope of what we said we'd do, but here's what I will say is, you know, we have use of force situations that occur from time to time. I mean, you can turn on the TV and look across the country on the national news, and police TV shows are of high interest. They're on every channel almost every night. Unfortunately, sometimes the work that we're involved in gets ugly and we have to place our hands on people. What we're going to do as an agency is we're going to look at it again on a case-by-case situation. We're going to probably do it similar to the way that we have. If we feel like in our very early looks at it, if we need to place them on admin leave and have a thorough investigation and a review board, we'll do those things. But to answer your question like you're asking it, I'm not going to do that.
Do you guys feel that since Trooper Martin is high profile now because of this incident and the paramedic incident, that there could be more allegations of excessive force, that he might become more of a hindrance than help with the force?
Okay, again, that's outside of the scope. We'd be happy to take questions about the incident and presentation. If we don't have any of those types of questions, we're going to go ahead and conclude the press conference. Does anybody have any questions like that right here?
I was going to ask if either of the troopers here, if they wanted to say.
No, neither one of the troopers are here. Manny?